Our speaker today is Doug Mann, a fellow Democrat who represents District 50 in the Missouri House of Representatives. He was elected to a two-year term in 2022 and decided not to run for re-election in November 2024. In addition to serving in the legislature, Doug is a civil rights attorney. Previously, he was a high school teacher for 6 years. Doug is active in the community and has volunteered with Planned Parenthood, Big Brothers Big Sisters, and other local nonprofits. He was born in New York and obtained his BA, Master's of Science, and Master's of Education from Niagara University and the University of Illinois, Chicago. He moved to Missouri to obtain his Juris Doctor from the University of Missouri School of Law. He and his wife attend Unitarian Universalist Church in Columbia. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So my understanding was that I had basic free reign to talk about just about anything that I wanted today. What I like to tell people now is that since I am not running for anything at the moment, you can bet that everything that I say is true because I have absolutely no reason to spin or lie about anything. So basically, I wanted to take the first part of today to kind of reflect on my time in the House and give you guys some of my thoughts on the House, on the institution, and then talk to you guys a little bit about some of the things that are going to be on the ballot this November for those of you that might be voting today or haven't voted yet. For those of you that have already voted, I'm sorry that you didn't get to get my wonderful wisdom on the initiatives beforehand, but I'm sure that you got the right answers on the quiz that is our elections. So you were right that I was elected in 2022 to my first term. And then last year, I made the fateful decision due to mental health issues to not run for re-election. The reason being that I wasn't 100% sure that I would be able to give 100% of myself to the campaign. And I wanted to make sure that there was someone running who could. To ensure that we keep that seat blue and that all the people that are depending on that seat being blue have someone that can truly represent them. And that's because of the first thing that I noticed about the House is the strength of our Boone County Democratic delegation. Before 2022, there were just two Democrats representing Boone County, Martha Stevens and David Tyson Smith at that point in time. And they were doing a phenomenal job down there. But when we were able to double our ranks, we were able to do a lot more. It's no secret that the Democrats do sit in the super minority. Hopefully this November, we are able to break the supermajority of the Republicans and just be in the minority, and hopefully we'll have some statewide office holders, and that'll allow us to do some pretty big things. But I think that it's important to really stress how lucky we are to have the people down there representing Columbia and Boone County that we do. Kathy Steinhoff is one of the most brilliant people when it comes to education that I have ever met in my entire life. And I was a former teacher, so I've been around a lot of people that deal with education issues. And the depth of knowledge that she has and the passion that she has for those issues is astounding. I sat on the education committee with Kathy this last session, and watching her fight for the issues that are important to Boone County and to the education system across Missouri was very heartening. It was very inspiring to watch. Watching her on the floor fight for what is right was a lot. You are all aware of SB 727, which is the bill that is bringing charter schools to Boone County. Kathy gave a very impassioned speech on the floor fighting back against that. All of us worked really hard. Unfortunately, we were not able to stop that from happening. Unfortunately, we weren't able to carve the charter schools in Boone County out of the bill. but we really fought hard, and Kathy was a big part of that. Um, David Tyson Smith was also a very big part of that. David is a phenomenal politician when it comes to working across the aisle and building relationships. Um, Watching him on the floor just walk around, talking with people, and truly doing the work necessary to ensure that he can call on favors across the aisle, that he can have an impact across the aisle is astounding. I learned a lot from David when it comes to working with other people. One of the things that we noticed about David, a story about David working with other people and kind of lobbying people on 727 is that there's like the parking garage that's attached to the sorry, attached to the Capitol, and everyone walks out of the same walkway to get to the garage, to get to their cars to leave. And the day before the vote on 727, you could find David out there in the parking garage right by the door, stopping every single person that walked out to try to lobby them to vote against 727. Every single person, in order to get to their car, had to go through David in order to do so. And I have no doubt that he was able to flip some votes across the aisle. If you look at the vote count, there were plenty of Republicans on 727 that voted no. And I have no doubt that David's work um, helped that David's work uh, made that possible. And then you have Adrian Plank, who I don't know anyone that cares more about their constituents than Adrian Plank. Um, he is constantly on the phones yelling at companies, yelling at different government entities in order to make sure that they're doing their job. There is the new program where on Amtrak expanding the amount of bikes that can go onto the Amtrak trains, that Adrian had a big hand in that. Working in order to get cell service, better cell service to rural Missouri, Adrian had a big hand in that. Really fighting every single day to ensure that his constituents got what they want. He discovered early on that, you know, as a Democrat, getting your legislation passed is not the easiest thing in the world and not something that is going to happen very often. Though, if you ask Adrian, he is more than willing to talk to you about composting and about composting week and his ability to get that through as a state holiday. But he really dug in early on constituent services, which is oftentimes a forgotten part of our job as state representatives, is helping people navigate the giant bureaucracy that is the Missouri state government, helping people get things done. Because the unfortunate reality is that for a lot of people, when they call an organization, when they call a state department, um, they might get ignored. The phone might not get picked up. But when one of us with the name representative before calls, we have special liaisons that we can call. The phones get picked up a little bit quicker and things get done a little bit faster. And then the fourth member of your delegation, hopefully, fingers crossed, going into next session, will be Greg Bush, the person that I endorsed to replace me. And I have no doubt that Greg will be a phenomenal addition, bringing his expertise from the healthcare field and bringing true passion for working class people into the House. That's the reason why I endorsed him and the reason why I think that he will make a great representative over the next 8 years. The next thing, though, not to bring things down, but to kind of bring down the mood, is really just an understanding of the work that's needed in order to fix the institution that is the House of Representatives here in Missouri. It's no secret that we had one of the, if not the least productive years, least productive sessions that Missouri's legislature has ever had this year. Not counting the budget, we passed a grand total of 28 policy bills. which is astoundingly low. There was a point not too long ago that Missouri was passing over 100 policy bills a year. And we were not able to get a lot of things done. Now, there is a silver lining to that in that a lot of bad things did not go through either. But there's a lot of problems here in Missouri that could use fixing. There's a lot of people that are hurting, and there's a lot of legislation that could be passed that could help people. And that's just not happening. And that's not because the legislation isn't being forwarded, that it's not being presented. It's because of institutional failures within the institution itself. Um, when it comes to getting hearings, as a Democrat, your chances of getting a hearing on your bill are very low. When it comes to actually getting your bill on the floor, it's very low. For example, I had what I think to be a very common sense piece of firearm legislation that I think that everyone across the aisle should be able to agree on. And I actually had a few Republicans that I talked to that said that they would agree on it, called Donna's Law, which essentially would allow people to put themselves, not someone else putting you on it, but someone to put themselves onto a do not sell list for firearms. So if someone is going through mental health struggles, they find themselves suffering from suicidal ideations, they would be able to put themselves onto a list so that firearms dealers would not sell them firearms. It seems, like I said, very common sense, something that would be very easy for Republicans to latch onto, and frankly would give Republicans a political win if it were to pass, because they would be able to say that they were doing something about gun deaths, right? Like it would be a win for them. Um, but we were told straight up by the Speaker's office that no legislation dealing with firearms was going to be heard that year. That it was DOA. And that is extremely disheartening that the politics of the moment really got in the way of doing something positive for Missourians. Now, one of the ways that that gets fixed is by breaking the supermajority, by giving Democrats more power within the House. I have no illusions. We're not going to be taking the gavel back this year, right? Like that's not something that's probably going to happen, unless something crazy and wild happens in the next 2 weeks. But we are making incremental change. We are making incremental progress, session over session, election cycle over election cycle, um, to eventually take back the gavel and eventually be able to kind of fix some of these institutional failures. Because there are people on both sides of the aisle that really their hearts are in the right place and they want to pass good legislation, but they can't because of the failures of, frankly, of the Speaker's office and failures of the institution as a whole. Um, when you talk to Republicans across the aisle, there are plenty of them that say that they don't want to vote a certain way, but that they are frankly strong-armed into voting that way. And that is an unfortunate reality as well. But if there were more Democrats and there was a safer landing place for those Republicans, I think that we would see more of them vote against their party, vote not the same as all the members of their party. And we saw that on bills like 727, that there is a willingness to do that, but we need to make those institutional changes in order for that to happen. And the last thing that I'll talk about that I noticed before I get to the things on the ballot is the importance of everyday folks getting involved. It's something that you hear all the time, the importance of voting, the importance of talking to people, but it's real. When I am down there in the House, I'm expected to know everything about everything, right? There's going to be hundreds of bills that are going to come across my desk, hundreds of bills that I'm going to hear and have to vote on. And I don't know all of the things about every single bill that's coming across my desk. Um, a good example of this is I sat on the Emerging Issues Committee, where all of the more controversial bills tend to go. And we had a bill come across our committee dealing with electricity pricing. Um, I don't know about you. I don't know anything about like utility regulation or electricity pricing or how any of that works. I get my bill and I pay my bill every month, and that's about as much as I know about electricity pricing. Um, but it came across my desk and I needed to know the information about that. So I was able to go to people that I knew had more expertise in that area. And they were able to explain it to me, frankly, like I was a 5-year-old child, because that's about the extent of the knowledge that I have about those types of things. Um, but that was made me a more informed individual. Everyone on this call has some type of expertise, something that you know a lot about, and things that you're passionate about. And if you reach out and you share that expertise, if you reach out and you share that passion, it's going to have an effect. Um, Another big example of how that works is nurses this session and the legislation dealing with advanced practice nurses and expanding their scope, allowing them to practice with less supervision from physicians. Those nurses, they were organized, and they were there every single week. They were passionate. I cannot tell you the number of times that I had a nurse in my office trying to explain to me the importance of this legislation. And I would say that there was a nurse in my office 3 times for every time there was a doctor in my office, talking about this legislation. And that legislation passed through committee. Unfortunately, it wasn't able to make it over the eventual finish line because of, like I said, institutional failures. Um, but they were able to get the legislation that they wanted through committee. They were able to kill a last minute amendment that would have tanked the legislation. And all of that is because they, as ordinary everyday citizens, were there in the building. They were emailing us, they were calling us, they were persistent. And that really got things done. Um, on the emails, the big thing that I always tell people is to make sure that you are writing individualized emails, because individualized emails are a lot more powerful, and people are much more likely to read them. Um, Whenever we get like the form emails, I just have my LA count how many of the form emails we get. I don't read every form email because it's the same email over and over again. It would get weird if I read every single one every single time. But whenever we get like individualized emails, I try to read them all, um, because I know that people are taking the time and that this is something that is important to them. So it's important that I take the time to read that. So before that, do you want me to stop for questions about that part before I go on to the amendments on the ballot, or do you want me to just go right into the amendments on the ballot?
Are there any questions at this point or comments? David?
I just put one in the chat. And what I said is, how exactly can the extra money from National Democratic Party help us break the supermajority or maybe do other things? You know, they just sent the DCCC or whatever it's called, sent several $100,000 to Missouri, and
Yep.
it was supposed to be for the state stuff, not the federal stuff.
Yeah. Honestly, putting more people on doors
Okay.
is the big one. One of the things that we have really not done a great job at over the last few years as Democrats in Missouri is showing up in rural areas, and knocking doors in those rural areas. And like I said, it's about moving the needle. There's going to be places that right now are like 70-30 districts, right? And the chances of winning a 70-30 district right now are pretty low. But what you can do, I talked to a group last night. What I said is like, even if you don't win that 70-30 district, you can make it a 65% Republican district, right? And that makes it easier for the next person. If we have people on doors, we're collecting information every session that makes it easier to run the next time around. And that's going to lead eventually to not only breaking the supermajority, but breaking the majority and getting the gavel back. Because we do have a good message. I believe that we have the right message, which is why I'm a Democrat, right? Because I think that we are on the right side on the issues. But we haven't done the best job of getting that message out to people, right? Allowing people to hear it and listening to people out there and listening to what their issues are. And I think that money, being able to pay canvassers to get out there and do that, is going to be the key to breaking that. So I see a couple of hands as well.
Yeah.
I don't know if you want me to call them or.
What I wanted to ask you, on that bill that didn't pass on the nurse practitioners.
Yep.
Currently, do physician assistants have to be under the same arrangement with physicians? Do they, or can they have a practice of their own more independently than a nurse practitioner?
I do believe that they have to be supervised by a physician as well.
Okay,
So.
because both the nurse practitioner actually has more education than the physician assistant,
Yeah.
even though the physician assistant tends to be higher paid.
Yeah. So, but I do think the physician assistant does still need to have some type of like supervision. I don't know if it's like the same like regime of supervision, but I do think that they do have to be supervised by one.
Okay, thank
Yep.
Ruth, did you have a question?
Well, did I understand correctly that there is some value in sending the form messages in that you count those and you know how many of your constituents all feel the same way, even though it's more valuable if we write an individual message to you?
Yeah. So with the form emails, if I have like numbers, I can go to and say like I've received dozens or I've received hundreds of emails from people saying X, Y, and Z, right? And that can be powerful. If you're sending me individualized emails, one of the things that I can do is I can pull like quotes of things that you have said in that individual email, or I can pull like data or facts or anything that you gave me, and I can use that. Because your words can sometimes be more powerful than my words can, if I can pull out like powerful quotes or things, which I've done in the past. I've pulled out things that people said in emails and used it during committee hearings. So,
Any other questions? Well, let's get on to the issues then. And I'll be honest, I'm still undecided on the three issues where the party is not taking a stand. So you can go ahead and try to convince me.
all right. So I'll just go in order. So the first one is Amendment 5. I believe I was supposed to talk about 5, 7, and A, if I remember correctly. All right, so Amendment 5 is the Lake Casino. So essentially this one would allow for a casino to be put on the Osage River down in Lake of the Ozarks. So right now, the Constitution does allow for riverboat gambling, but only along the Missouri and Mississippi River. And this is being pushed a lot by an organization known as Bally's, who run casinos already. They're the ones that are essentially looking to build a casino down there. The selling points on it are the tax revenue, right? That gambling brings in tax revenue and will also bring in investment into the community, whether that's building infrastructure or jobs or things along those lines. So I believe that the estimated tax revenue that they're looking to bring in every year, if I remember correctly, let me hold up, I have the numbers here. So the estimated annual gaming tax revenue is about $14.3 million a year. Now that accounts for a small part of our budget. We have about a $50 billion budget. But you know, every little bit helps. Also the understanding is that should be earmarked for education. Though there are some questions around the wording of the legislation and whether or not that would actually go towards what education pieces that would actually go towards. Now the negatives. There are, like I said, there's questions about whether or not that money is actually going to go where they're saying that it's going to go. There's also questions about whether or not it would bring in the amount that they're saying that it would bring in. Also, there being questions about like whether or not there would be the infrastructure improvements that they are saying. So basically, there's a lot of people that are questioning whether or not all of the benefits that we hear are actually going to happen. The other one that isn't getting talked about a lot is the fact that the Osage Nation is also looking to build a casino in Miller County. The Osage Nation, which is currently in Oklahoma, but has their historical home here in Missouri, under the National Indian Gaming Act, would like to build that casino. And all they need is a signature by Governor Parson or whoever the governor is at the time to do that. They initially put in their petition for, I believe it's a $60 million facility in 2021, but it has not been approved just yet. So if they were able to get approved, and Bally's was this amendment also got approved, and Bally's were to build their casino, that would put 2 casinos in the area, and there's a lot of questions around whether or not there is the economy there, whether or not there is the demand there to actually sustain 2 separate casinos in the area. That would have an effect on the gaming tax because the Osage Nation would not have to pay the gaming tax under the Federal Indian Gaming Act. So right now there are a lot of people that I know that are voting no on it because they believe that this is an attempt to try to undercut the Osage Nation from building their casino, and they have problems with us undercutting Native Americans from being able to have some type of income from the casino gambling. So Steve, you said that they would not need a state license. So basically under the National Indian Gaming Act, they just need the governor to approve it. That's kind of the way that it works. They don't need the constitutional amendment in order to do it. So
I was puzzled that that reads as allowing a casino all the way up to the confluence with the Missouri River, which would technically make like the intersection of Highway 50 and 63 a possible location. Is there any talk about that, or any chance that would be the location instead?
No, right now it's just down in the Lake of the Ozarks where they're looking to build it, where Bally's would be looking to build it. Because like I said, this is basically just Bally's wants to build a casino. They're the ones that are doing a lot of the bankrolling of the Yes campaign on this because they think that it would be profitable to build a casino there. I think I saw another question in the chat. Yeah, casinos can definitely be a boon for certain businesses, especially if the business is bankruptcy. Yeah. Like that's the other piece, right? Like there are people that are voting no because they're like anti-vice and they don't want the gambling in place because they know that gambling can cause addiction and cause problems for people. So it's also the same thing with the sports betting, right? Like some people don't like the idea of gambling, think that gambling is a societal ill, and don't want that as well. So any other questions on 5 before I move on to 7? 7 and A, I think, are a little bit more straightforward, in my opinion.
What's your recommendation on the gambling? On both of two and both of them, actually.
Yeah. So I was a no on both of them. I personally do not have a problem with casinos or sports betting. It's the wording and the other pieces of the legislation that I don't like. For the sports betting one, it's the fact that it allows for the money to go to education. It doesn't mandate that the money goes to education, which means that the legislature would have to create the funnel to get that money to education. And I don't know if I trust the legislature at this point, as it's made up, to not just put the money into general revenue and spend it as general revenue. To be frank with the casino one, I am one of those people that I have a little bit of a problem with Bally's trying to undercut the Osage Nation at this point in time.
Dave Luthel, a question?
Yes, I have a question. You mentioned that the governor needs to approve. I was thinking that the Secretary of the Interior had not yet approved it. Does the Secretary of the Interior have a role in this? And has the Secretary, if so, has the Secretary acted?
I believe that it's been approved at the federal level, and that it's just waiting on the Missouri State Governor, but I'm not 100% sure. I can double check on that and get back to you on that. But I know that it has to be approved at the federal level and at the state level. So.
Okay, I guess the other issues.
All right. So Amendment 7, or the ranked choice voting amendment. So this is the one that has the fancy ballot candy on it, saying that only Missouri citizens can vote in elections, which per the invitation, I'm on the understanding that everyone here knows that only Missouri citizens can vote in Missouri elections at this point in time. But the meat of this is the anti-ranked choice voting piece, trying to ban ranked choice voting. So when this came across the floor, I stood up and I talked a little bit about ranked choice voting on the floor and what ranked choice voting is and the effects that research has shown that ranked choice voting can have. So ranked choice voting, essentially, instead of doing first past the post voting, so instead of just picking one candidate, you would have a list of candidates that are running and you would rank them in your preferential order, first through third, first through fifth, depends on how many candidates are running. And then basically they would, if your first didn't get enough votes, then they would knock that person out and your vote would go to the second person, so on and so forth, until you ended up having a winner. Now, what this does, according to the research that I've read, the big thing is that it moderates campaigns and it moderates the people that end up winning. You end up having fewer extremists that are successful in their campaigns. Right now, it's no secret that with the way that our primary system works, especially in super safe districts, especially if you're in a super safe district, the actual campaign is in the primary and people end up having to run to the extreme left or the extreme right within the primary. And that's how you end up with more extreme members down in the House. That's how we've ended up with, I won't name names, but some of the more extreme Republicans spouting off some of the more extreme positions down in Jeff City. And it is some of those more extreme Republicans that are pushing this. And frankly, I think it's because, if I'm like being semi-cynical here, I think it's because they understand that they would not win elections if ranked choice voting was a thing. Not only does it moderate the candidates, it moderates the campaign itself, because there is less incentive to mudsling. Because you're not only campaigning to be someone's first choice, you're also campaigning to say, hey, listen, I think that I'm great. Herb Tillema, also great. If you're not going to vote me number one, vote Herb number one, vote me number two, that would be great. Or vote me number one, vote Herb number two. There's incentive to do things like that, which will end up actually moderating the campaign itself. Not only that, but it has been found that in situations where there are ranked choice voting, you have more women that run and you have more minorities that run, and you have more women that win and you have more minorities that win, which gives you, in a sense, a more representative legislative body. So that's my pitch on why you should vote. Why ranked choice voting is not this big scary thing that they're trying to sell you that it is. One of the things that they said on the House floor that I found somewhat insulting is that they said that it would be too confusing for the Missouri voter to use ranked choice voting, which I think was their way of saying that they think that the Missouri voter is too dumb to make a list of their top 5 favorite candidates. Which I don't know about you, but you could ask me to, make my top 5 list of favorite pizza toppings, and I could do that pretty easily. And I think if you can do that, you can pretty much rank order your top 5 favorite candidates for an election. Now, the other piece that was talked about a little bit on the floor that hasn't gotten a lot of traction as far as a reason for the no vote is this changing of the word from all to only for citizens voting. So right now, the way the Constitution reads is that all Missouri citizens can vote in elections. If you change that to only Missouri citizens can vote in elections, then you open the door to the restriction of some Missouri citizens from voting, because that word all will no longer be there. Essentially meaning that you could say, well, listen, it says only Missouri citizens can vote, but we're not going to allow this certain subgroup of Missouri citizens to vote, or we're going to make it harder for this subgroup of Missouri citizens to vote, and that will no longer be unconstitutional under the Missouri Constitution. So there is some fear around that being a problem. So, and I guess I should give the reasons for yes. Basically, in support is that they want to make it super clear that only Missouri citizens can vote, and this would make that a little bit more clear, and that we have a history of having first past the post, and that seems to have worked. We haven't had problems, so why change it if it's not broken? Is the arguments that you hear on the other side. So. Yes, Dave.
Hi. The third part of that is almost as scary as the second part of that. You didn't mention that part where the plurality winner in a primary will be the person on the ballot in the general election.
Yeah.
What's that all about? If that were true, would that not disallow, if that were in place now, Kamala Harris from replacing Joe Biden on the presidential ballot?
Theoretically, yes, that could stop that. But I think that the way that this is written and the way that this would be implemented, it would only deal with state elections down. I don't think that it would necessarily affect the federal elections, but I would have to check with probably Brianna Lennon about that.
This was a legislative proposed amendment. How did this, I can't imagine how this even got on. How is this so-called constitutional amendment even constitutional?
There are some arguments that it wouldn't be, especially because of that changing the all to only. And there's also questions around First Amendment rights and the ability to actually have the elections the way that you want. I think, like I said, I think the reason why this was pushed through is because there's a lot of people in Jeff City that know that they would not win their elections if it was a ranked choice system. And that scares them.
Right. So if this proposition wins, and it will, are there plans to launch a challenge in the courts?
I am unsure. I haven't heard anything about a challenge in the courts, but I definitely, I would not be surprised if there was. Any other questions on that one before I move on to Prop A? Which I also think is pretty straightforward.
Thank you, Doug.
Yep.
By the way, having sat through all of those Republican ads during the primary, you know, maybe the Missouri voters aren't smart enough to figure this out.
I think they are. I think they can figure it out. I think they can figure out making the list. All right, so Prop A. Prop A is the called, I think it's being marketed as the Healthy Families. This would essentially raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour. It would then index it to inflation, and would require paid sick leave, so an hour of paid sick leave for every 30 hours worked. So right now, under Missouri law, employers are not required to provide sick leave to their employees. And as I said to the group that I was talking to last night, one of the most alarming facts that I have ever learned in my life is that a very large portion of foodborne illnesses, when you go out to a restaurant, is because the person in the back didn't have sick leave and was making your food when they had a cold or something similar to that. So it's very important in my mind that people have sick leave, and this would make that mandatory. Second, raising the minimum wage. We have people that are living in, they're the working poor. They're working 40 hours a week, and they don't have, and they're still having to be on food stamps. They're still needing public assistance. At $15 an hour, if you're working full time, it would be $31,200 a year, I believe, would be how much you would make, which is still on the lower end of the pay scale, but is closer to what people refer to as a living wage than what we have right now. And since lower wage earners are more likely to spend every dollar that they earn, this will boost the economy by boosting spending, because people on the higher end, people that make more money, are more likely to save it or invest it. People that are on the lower end are more likely to spend it on things. And as we know, spending is what churns the economy. It's what keeps the economy moving. The arguments against it, the problems that people say, is essentially from the business community and from the chamber, essentially that this will, the minimum wage piece will raise costs, causing them to have to lay people off, to not hire people, and to raise the prices of their products and services. Because since labor is one of the larger costs, if you run a business, if their costs go up, our costs go up when we purchase their stuff. So my advice on this would be to vote yes on Prop A. I think that sick leave is super important for people, as someone that gets sick from time to time, as I'm sure all of you get sick from time to time. It's very nice to be able to take that time off. It's very important to be able to take that time off. And also research, there's a lot of research out there showing that raising the minimum wage up to $15 an hour won't have the super dire consequences that the business community is saying that it would have. So, and I'll take any questions on that one.
Yeah, Dave Taylor asks, what are the chances the legislature will simply repeal this if it passes?
There is a pretty good chance that the Republicans will try to repeal this, that they will go against the will of voters. We saw that with a lot of different pieces, that they'll try, a lot of different initiatives that have passed, that they will try to repeal it or weaken it over time. So, and the business community, from what I've heard, the business community doesn't have a huge problem with the sick leave part. They don't have they're like, that's fine, whatever. It's that minimum wage part that they have a big problem with. So,
Kathy?
Yes, I was going to ask, Doug, do you know if there's been a good, valid research on what the impact has been of raising the wage that was done the past few years in terms of raising prices?
so that's a little bit hard for the researchers to study very well, just because of the complicating factor of the pandemic and the supply chain shortages. It's kind of hard to gauge what of the prices was the increased cost of the minimum wage and how much was the supply chain shortages and the worker shortages that we saw following the pandemic. So
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Any more questions?
Could
Dave
you go back?
Robinson.
Could go back to
Heather?
Steve's comment about Amendment 7 being a direct hit to St. Louis. Would Amendment 7 eliminate the possibility for the continued enactment of having ranked choice voting in St. Louis?
yes, it would. It would. So St. Louis has like the preference voting system that they have, which is very close to the ranked choice voting, and it would stop them from being able to do that.
Huh. My understanding was that the St. Louis is not exactly ranked choice voting, and that particular part of the St. Louis voting laws would not be affected by this, or would be, that this wouldn't affect them.
I know on the floor, all of the St. Louis members were discussing the fact that it would
Wow.
stop them from being able to, because it's not first past the post. And this would essentially make it so that all elections in Missouri would have to be first past the post.
Okay, thanks. Oh, that's disturbing.
Yep.
David?
I just want to get a few thoughts off my chest here. I really, really appreciate your evaluation of our legislative team. And I want to tell you that I was in the legislature doing a lot of testifying in the bad old days, and came to love and depend on Martha Stevens. And she just was like I don't know, she just captured my heart to just watch her do what she was doing there. And so when she, stepped away a little early, I went into a terrible funk, and you appeared, and and I once again fell in love with a favorite legislator, and then of course was crushed when you decided to walk away. You had to. I understand that. So one thing I want to say is you've made me feel better, because certainly David Tyson Smith has stayed and engaged a lot longer than I thought he would. Adrian won, which I was afraid was never going to happen. And you brought in Doug and, the other, Kathy, of course, new district there. And so the way you began was just perfect, Doug. And I just want to say that even though you and Martha have gotten out of Jeff City, kind of, or at least out of the legislature, you'll never leave my heart, because the two of you have just been beacons of hope for me.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that. And yes, you are right. Martha was a force and continues to be a force in the work that she does. So Martha is a true inspiration.
And you are too, and will be too. I look for it. I don't attend your public events. I watch every one of them that I can. I'm still afraid of crowds because of my COVID and other problems. But I want you to know I'm right there with you.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
And I may also say that I'd heard that Martha Stevens is struggling with cancer.
Oh, I didn't hear that.
She's had, I think, as far as we can tell, successful surgery, and she hasn't talked to many people about it. As far as I know, things are going well. I've been struggling with cancer too, so I can say so far so good.
Dave Taylor had an additional question about who composes the legislative introduced ballot amendments, and do the other legislators have an opportunity to affect that wording?
So for Amendment 7, so for the ranked choice voting one, in the House, that was Ben Baker was the one that put it forward, and there is an opportunity through the same legislative process that we use for regular bills to affect the wording. There were attempts to take the ballot candy off, and those failed. There were attempts to flip the wording so that the ranked choice voting pieces were at the top and the ballot candy was at the bottom, and that failed as well. So I guess I did end up naming names at the end of the day.
Kathy?
Doug, did you comment on what Dave Taylor asked in terms of the legislature repealing Prop A if it wins?
I would say that there's a pretty good chance of them going in and trying to do something to mess with it. So,
Steve Calloway, welcome. And you have a question?
Yeah, I do. Thanks very much. And I had some comments in there for Doug as well. Couple of things, and I don't know that I heard you comment, Doug, on Amendment 6. And I do know that there are some members of our Boone County delegation who are in favor of that particular amendment. Amendment 6 is the one about usage of court costs, certain court costs and fees in support of law enforcement. And my take, again, so convince me why I should vote yes on that. I'm a no on that right now because it brings back to my mind shades of Ferguson and the courts and the judicial system and law enforcement using fees and fines to build their government coffers and support their city in an unfair manner that victimizes the folks who are most likely to come in contact with the system. So help me understand why some of our delegation is in favor of that and why I should not vote no, because right now I'm a hard no. And by the way, also anything that gets proposed as an initiative on the ballot by our legislature is also a hard no for me, because to me, they're up to no good. So help me out with that, Doug. And thank you so much for your service. I get your report, and I really, really appreciate the information that you provide in there. And thank you for your service.
Thank you very much. So this is going to be a hard one for me because I am also a no on Amendment 6 for the reasons that you articulated, that I don't think that, I mean, I was a government worker as a teacher for a while and I paid into my pension, and I think that it's important. I think that pensions are great and wonderful things, but I think that it's important that you pay into your pension that you're going to be receiving. And I don't think that it is right for those pensions to be funded off of the backs of people that are most, like you said, most likely to come in contact with the system. There's a lot of people that are saying that, so like one of the arguments against that I have heard is that these fees are relatively small. The fees that would be used in order to fund this, but even if the fees are small, the people that are, like you said, most likely to come in contact with the system are people that are on the lower end of the socioeconomic spectrum. So while those fees might be small for someone that's making like a decent amount of money, someone with like a 6-figure salary, right? It's not small for someone that's making $35,000 a year or less, right? The other pieces that I've heard as far as arguments for is the recruiting and retention pieces for law enforcement. Because right now, one of the big arguments for why you should get and stay with a government job is that pension, right? Is that guaranteed retirement money. And if we don't have that, then we're going to continue to have problems recruiting and retaining sheriffs, which we currently do have a problem recruiting and retaining law enforcement officers. So those would be the arguments that I've heard before.
Let me comment that I would refer both of you to, if you didn't have a chance to hear it, the presentation that Prosecutor Roger Johnson gave a short time ago to Muleskinners, and it's posted on our website. The fee it's $3, and it's my understanding that it's levied when there is a conviction, not an arrest, and that the $3 for the sheriff's pension and $4 for the prosecutor's pension. And I know that Roger Johnson made the point that judges have discretion to waive those fees if it would be difficult for the person to pay it. So that's one thought. I believe now, I don't know if he commented about the prosecutor, but I believe the sheriffs are paying into their pension. They would be paying into their pension now.
Yeah, they are paying into it. It's a philosophical issue that I have with the
Right.
paying of the pensions on the back of people that are more likely to come in contact with the system than others.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I hearken back to the whole federal judgment that they came up with and report they did that came back and actually said that what Ferguson was doing in terms of those fees and things like that was a contributor to this whole thing happening in Ferguson, and that they were improperly doing it, and they had a judgment that the city and the police force was under overwatch by the feds. So again, whatever amount it is, I'm with Doug. It's a philosophical thing that's just not a road that we need to go down. And as a University of Missouri employee that had a pension for many years that we did not pay into, we started paying into that pension. And so, if folks want to have a good job, that's the responsibility of folks who provide these jobs. And I understand sheriffs and judicial system is a public service, but dang it, we need to fund that. So if legislature would just say, let's stop cutting people's taxes and put the money from the revenue and taxes in to pay for these things, then we don't have to go out and put it on the backs of the few people who may be least able to pay for this stuff. So again, I'm done. Thanks.
Sue?
Along the same line, I would say that I don't know how the two of those pensions started and why they started, but since other county employees are paid a pension, which is paid through traditional means by the county, I think, and the legislature, it impacts all this. I think that the legislature should solve their own problem. And that's where I'm voting no.
All right. Any other comments or questions for Doug? Thank you very much for being here and for your service. And I really don't know you very well, but I feel like I know you a lot better now. And I'm really glad for the time that you've been serving us in Boone County.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And I saw in there that I shouldn't go away too far, and I don't plan on going away too far, so don't worry about that part.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day.
Same to you.
Thank you so much,
We
Doug.
have an